The windshield wipers couldn't keep up with the snow anymore, and Adrian James realized with growing alarm that he'd made a terrible mistake leaving the resort. He squinted through the white curtain outside, his luxury SUV crawling along what he hoped was still the mountain road. The GPS had lost signal 20 minutes ago, his phone showed no service, and the storm that the resort staff had warned him about was proving to be far worse than he'd imagined. He was a man who thrived on control. At 32, he'd built his commercial real estate empire from the ground up, turning a modest inheritance into a portfolio worth over $50 million. He scheduled his life down to 15-minute increments, controlled boardrooms with a few sharp words, and never, ever found himself unprepared. Yet here he was, barely able to see 3 feet in front of his vehicle, somewhere in the Colorado Rockies with night falling fast. The SUV's tires suddenly lost traction. Adrian felt the sickening slide as the vehicle drifted sideways, and despite his best efforts to steer into the skid, the massive vehicle rolled slowly into what felt like a ditch. The airbags didn't deploy because the impact was too gentle, but when he tried to reverse, the wheels just spun uselessly. "Damn it," he muttered, slamming his palm against the steering wheel. He sat there for a moment, taking stock. The engine was still running, he had about half a tank of gas, but staying in the car overnight in this storm could be deadly. He needed to find shelter. Through the swirling snow, he thought he saw a faint glow. Squinting harder, he could barely make out what looked like a structure about 100 yards away. A cabin, maybe. Without further options, Adrian grabbed his leather jacket from the back seat, pulled it on over his cashmere sweater, and pushed open the door. The wind hit him like a physical force, stealing his breath. He'd been skiing plenty of times, but he'd never experienced weather like this. Head down, he trudged toward the light, his dress shoes completely inadequate for the deep snow. His feet were already numb by the time he reached the small cabin and pounded on the door with a fist that had lost most of its feeling. The door swung open, and warmth rushed out along with the smell of something cooking. A woman stood there, backlit by a fire, her eyes wide with surprise. "Please," Adrian managed through chattering teeth. "My car went off the road, I need help." She didn't hesitate, grabbing his arm and pulling him inside before shutting the door firmly against the howling wind. "You're freezing. Get by the fire now." Adrian stumbled toward the stone fireplace while the woman disappeared into what he assumed was a bedroom. He held his hands toward the flames, wincing as feeling started to return to his fingers. His shoes and the bottom of his pants were soaked through, and he was shaking violently. The woman returned with an armful of blankets and what looked like men's clothing. "Here, the bedroom is through there. Get out of those wet clothes before you get hypothermia. These were my dad's, they should fit well enough." "Thank you," Adrian said, his teeth still chattering. He took the clothes and retreated to the small bedroom, peeling off his soaked designer shoes, his wet wool pants, and his damp sweater. The flannel shirt and thick sweatpants she'd given him were worn but clean and blessedly dry. Thick wool socks completed the outfit. When he emerged, wrapped in one of the blankets, the woman was stirring something in a pot on an old-fashioned wood stove. Now that he wasn't on the verge of freezing to death, Adrian could actually look at her. She was probably in her late 20s, with long chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore jeans and a thick sweater and moved around the small cabin with easy efficiency. Pretty didn't quite capture it, he thought. There was something striking about her, an openness in her expression that you didn't see much in his world. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "You need something hot in you. It's just vegetable soup, but it'll help." "I'm Adrian," he said, settling into the chair. "Adrian James." "I can't thank you enough. I thought I was going to have to spend the night in my car. Clara Rodriguez, she replied, ladling soup into a bowl. And you would have died if you'd stayed in your car. This storm is serious. I've been listening to the emergency radio. They're saying it's the worst blizzard to hit this area in 30 years. Roads are completely shut down. No one's going anywhere for at least a few days. The reality of the situation hit Adrian as she handed him the bowl. A few days, trapped in this tiny cabin. He thought of his meetings, his conference calls, his deal that was supposed to close on Tuesday. My phone has no service. Nothing does up here, even on a good day, Clara said, settling into the chair across from him with her own bowl. The emergency radio is battery-powered. It's all we've got for information. Adrian asked, then realized how that sounded. I mean, is someone else here? Just us, Clara said. My dad owned this cabin. He passed away 6 months ago. I came up here to sort through his things, maybe figure out what to do with the place. I was planning to head back down the mountain tomorrow morning, but clearly that's not happening now. I'm sorry about your father, Adrian said, and meant it. The soup was simple but good, and he could feel warmth slowly spreading through his body. Clara shrugged, but he could see the grief in her eyes. He loved it up here. He was a writer, mysteries mostly. This was his escape from the world. He always said the mountains helped him think clearly. Did it work? Adrian asked. I think so. He published 12 novels over 20 years. Never made the bestseller lists, but he had his dedicated readers. He always said that was enough. She paused. What were you doing driving in this weather? The resort must have warned you. Adrian felt embarrassed. They did. I thought I could beat the storm. I had important meetings scheduled, a deal closing. I convinced myself I had time to get down the mountain before it hit. He shook his head. Stupid, I know. Pretty stupid, Clara agreed, but there was kindness in her tone. What kind of deal? I'm in commercial real estate. Development, mostly. I buy properties, renovate them, flip them, or rent them out. He didn't mention the scale of his operation or his net worth. Something about this cabin, about Clara, made him want to just be Adrian, not Adrian James of James Development Corporation. Sounds stressful, Clara said. It can be. What do you do? I'm a teacher. 3rd grade. 28 8-year-olds who think I'm the coolest person alive because I let them have extra recess on Fridays. Her smile was genuine, lighting up her whole face. It's chaos and noise and constant energy, and I love every minute of it. Adrian found himself smiling back. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had a conversation this easy, this unguarded. In his world, every interaction was a negotiation, every word calculated for maximum effect. Clara just spoke, openly and honestly, like she had nothing to hide and nothing to prove. They talked while they finished their soup, about small things. She told him about her students, about the one kid who insisted on bringing his pet rock for show and tell every single week. He found himself telling her about the time he'd accidentally locked himself on the roof of a building he was renovating, something he'd never told anyone because it didn't fit his carefully crafted image. You called the fire department? Clara asked, barely suppressing laughter. I called my assistant who called the fire department, Adrian corrected. I have some dignity. You were stuck on a roof for 3 hours. Clara laughed then, a full, unrestrained sound that made Adrian laugh too, really laugh in a way he hadn't in years. As the evening wore on, the storm intensified. The wind screamed around the cabin and snow piled against the windows. Clara showed Adrian around the small space, which didn't take long. Living room with the fireplace and wood stove, a tiny kitchen, 1 bedroom with a double bed and a bathroom with a composting toilet and a sink that drew from a well. So, Adrian said, addressing the obvious problem. 1 bed, Clara bit her lip. The couch pulls out. It's not comfortable, but it's better than the floor. You take the bed, you're the guest, and you almost froze to death. I'll take the couch. Absolutely not, Adrian said firmly. You take the bed, I'll be fine on the couch. They argued about it for 10 minutes before Clara finally threw up her hands. Fine. We're both adults. The bed's big enough. We'll put pillows between us if it makes you feel better. It was practical, logical, and completely unlike anything Adrian would normally agree to. Yet here, in this tiny cabin with the storm raging outside, normal rules didn't seem to apply. Okay, he said. They stayed up talking by the fire, playing cards that Clara found in a drawer. She taught him a game her dad had invented, full of complicated rules that seemed to change every round. Adrian suspected she was making half of it up, but he didn't care. When had he last spent an evening just playing cards? When had he last gone more than an hour without checking his phone? Around midnight, they finally decided to sleep. The cabin had grown cold despite the fire, and Clara banked it carefully for the night. She gave Adrian an extra blanket, and they settled into the bed with a careful row of pillows down the middle. Good night, Adrian, Clara said softly in the darkness. Good night, Clara, and thank you seriously. You saved my life today. You're welcome. Try not to make any more stupid decisions tomorrow. He could hear the smile in her voice, and he found himself smiling too as he drifted off to sleep. Adrian woke to pale light filtering through the curtains and the smell of coffee. For a moment, he was completely disoriented. The pillow barrier had disintegrated during the night, and he was acutely aware of how close Clara was, still sleeping, her hair spread across the pillow. He carefully extracted himself from the bed without waking her and padded into the main room. The view outside stopped him cold. Snow had piled nearly 3 feet high against the cabin, and it was still coming down heavily. The world was completely white, the trees transformed into alien shapes under their heavy burdens. His SUV was buried, just a vague mound in the landscape. Clara emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in a thick robe. Still snowing, she observed, moving to the wood stove to start heating water. How long do you think we'll be stuck here? Adrian asked. Hard to say. The emergency radio said the storm should pass by tomorrow afternoon, but then they'll need time to clear the roads. 3 or 4 days minimum. She glanced at him. Is that a problem? Adrian thought about his meetings, his deals, his meticulously planned schedule. Then he thought about yesterday evening, about laughing over cards, about conversation that flowed like water. No, he said, surprising himself. It's not a problem. They fell into an easy routine over the next 2 days. Adrian insisted on helping with everything. He chopped wood, hauled water, helped Clara prepare meals from the supplies in the cabin. His hands blistered from the axe, unused to manual labor, but he didn't complain. There was something satisfying about physical work, about immediate cause and effect. Chop wood, have heat. Simple. They talked constantly. Clara told him about growing up in Denver, the only child of a father who preferred fictional worlds to real ones and a mother who'd left when Clara was 5. Adrian found himself opening up about his own childhood, about parents who'd built a modest construction business and died in a car accident when he was 22, leaving him with just enough to start his own company and a burning need to prove something to no one in particular. You like it? Clara asked on the second afternoon. They were sitting by the fire, melting snow for water. The real estate business. Adrian considered the question seriously. I like the challenge. I like building something, taking a rundown property and transforming it into something valuable. But the rest of it, the constant meetings, the negotiations, the politics, I could do without that. So why not change it? You're the boss, right? It's not that simple. Isn't it? Clara looked at him directly. You built the company. You can run it however you want. The investors, the market expectations, there are pressures. That you let control you, Clara said gently. I'm not trying to be harsh, Adrian, but you almost died because you couldn't say no to a meeting. Is that really how you want to live? Her words hit harder than they should have. Adrian had spent 10 years building his company, sacrificing everything for success. He dated casually but never seriously, never letting anyone close enough to interfere with his goals. He worked 70-hour weeks, constantly traveling, constantly dealing. And for what? Money he barely had time to spend. A reputation as a shark in a world full of sharks. How did you get so wise? He asked, trying to lighten the mood. Third graders, Clara said seriously. They're brutally honest. They'll tell you if your lesson is boring, if you're being unfair, if you have something in your teeth. You learn to cut through the nonsense pretty quickly. That evening, after dinner, Clara pulled out an old record player and a box of vinyl. Dad's collection, she explained. Mostly jazz and classical. They listened to Miles Davis while the storm continued outside, and somehow Adrian ended up telling Clara about the deal he'd been rushing to close, a major development in downtown Chicago that would have netted him $5 million in profit. Will you lose it? Clara asked, probably. My competitors are circling. Without me there to close it, they'll swoop in. And how do you feel about that? Adrian sat with the question. I thought I'd be more upset, but honestly, sitting here listening to music, talking to you, I can't seem to care that much. Clara smiled. That's probably healthy, or I've lost my edge. Maybe your edge was cutting you, Clara suggested. They stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing. Clara shared her dreams of maybe writing a book someday, like her father. Adrian admitted he'd always wanted to try his hand at actual construction, building something with his own hands instead of just managing contractors. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences, and Adrian realized he was more relaxed than he'd been in years. When they finally went to bed, neither bothered with the pillow barrier. It seemed silly now, after 2 days of constant proximity. Adrian was hyper-aware of Clara beside him, of the way she fit perfectly under his arm when she unconsciously moved closer in her sleep. The next morning, Adrian woke first and just watched her sleep for a moment. Her face was peaceful, a small smile on her lips like she was dreaming something pleasant. Something had shifted in him over the past few days, something fundamental. The urgency that usually drove him, the constant need to be doing, achieving, conquering, had quieted. In its place was something else, something focused entirely on the woman beside him. Clara's eyes opened, and for a long moment they just looked at each other. Adrian could see his own feelings reflected in her expression, wonder and uncertainty, and something that felt a lot like hope. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he replied. Neither moved. The moment stretched, charged with possibility. Then Clara's hand came up to touch his face, tentative, and Adrian leaned into it. "This is crazy," Clara said softly. "We barely know each other." "I know," Adrian agreed, but he also knew that he'd talked to Clara more in 3 days than he'd talked to most people in years. He knew she took her coffee black, that she hummed while she cooked, that she cried at sappy commercials on the emergency radio. He knew she was kind and smart and funny, that she saw through his defenses like they were made of glass. "I don't do things like this," Clara continued. "I'm practical. I plan. I don't fall for strangers I meet during snowstorms." "Neither do I," Adrian said. Then, because it was true and because he was tired of not saying what he felt, he added, "But I'm falling anyway." Clara's breath caught. "Adrian, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know this is weird and fast and probably a terrible idea, but I'm going to be honest with you because I think you deserve that. These past 3 days have been the best 3 days I've had in years. You make me laugh. You challenge me. You make me want to be better than I am. And if that scares you, I understand, but I needed you to know." Clara was quiet for a long moment, her hand still on his face. Then she smiled, slow and beautiful. "It does scare me, but I'm falling too." Adrian kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she was something precious. Clara kissed him back, and it felt like coming home, like finding something he hadn't known he was looking for. They stayed like that for a long time, trading soft kisses, learning the taste and feel of each other, until the cold finally drove them out of bed to restart the fire. The rest of the day had a dreamlike quality. They moved around the small cabin in comfortable synchrony, touching constantly now that the barrier had been broken. A hand on the small of her back as Adrian passed by. Clara's fingers in his hair when they sat by the fire. Kisses that started soft and grew heated before they pulled back, both agreeing wordlessly that they wanted to take this slowly, to savor it. They talked about what happened next, the practical realities. Adrian lived in Chicago. Clara lived in Denver. They both had demanding careers. But somehow, those obstacles seemed surmountable now. They would figure it out, they decided. Denver to Chicago was a 2-hour flight. They could make it work if they both wanted to, and they both clearly wanted to. That night, the emergency radio announced that the storm had finally passed, and road crews would begin clearing the mountain roads the next morning. They should have been relieved, but Adrian felt a pang of loss. These days in the cabin had been a bubble, separate from real life. What happened when they had to return to the world? "Hey," Clara said, reading his expression. "We'll be okay. This isn't ending just because we're leaving the cabin." "How do you know?" Adrian asked. "Because I don't want it to end, and neither do you. That's enough to start with." She was right, Adrian realized. It was enough. The next morning they heard the distant sound of snowplows. By afternoon, a snow cat made its way to the cabin, sent to check on Clara after she'd missed her expected return date. The driver, a gruff older man named Pete, raised an eyebrow at finding two people but didn't comment. He helped Adrian dig out his SUV, which miraculously started, and offered to escort them both down the mountain. Clara packed her father's clothes, the record player, a few other personal items. Adrian watched her move through the cabin one last time, saying goodbye to this place that had meant so much to her father and had become the site of something important for both of them. "You could keep it," Adrian said. "The cabin, not sell it, I mean." Clara turned to him. "I was actually thinking the same thing. Maybe come up here on school breaks in the summer. It would be nice to have a place to escape to." "I could help you fix it up," Adrian offered. "Do some of that actual building I was talking about." Clara smiled. "I'd like that." The drive down the mountain was slow and careful, Pete's snow cat leading the way. When they finally reached the main road, civilization rushing back in the form of other vehicles and cell service, Adrian's phone exploded with notifications. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of emails, frantic texts from his assistant. Clara glanced at him. "The real-world calls." "Yeah," Adrian said. He started to reach for his phone, then stopped. Instead, he pulled over to the side of the road, right there with Pete's snow cat disappearing around a bend. "Clara." "Yes. Come to Chicago with me. I know you have work you need to get back, but this weekend come visit. Let me show you my city. Let me take you to dinner somewhere that isn't a cabin in a snowstorm. Let me prove that this wasn't just some weird isolation thing." Clara bit her lip, considering. Then she nodded. "Okay, this weekend, but Adrian?" "Yeah, I know this wasn't just an isolation thing. And I think you know it too." She was right, as usual. Adrian smiled and pulled back onto the road. They parted ways at the base of the mountain, Clara heading to her apartment in Denver, Adrian catching a flight back to Chicago. The separation felt wrong after 3 days of constant proximity, but they texted constantly, sharing everything and nothing. Clara sent him pictures of her classroom, her students' artwork. Adrian sent her photos of Chicago at night, the view from his high-rise condo. When Friday came, Adrian picked Clara up from O'Hare personally, something he never did. He always sent a car service, but he wanted to see her the moment she walked through the arrival gate, wanted to watch her face light up when she saw him. She walked through in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, and Adrian thought she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. She dropped her bag and walked straight into his arms, and kissing her there in the middle of the airport felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Hi," she said against his lips. "Hi," he replied. "Welcome to Chicago." He took her to his condo first, and he tried to see it through her eyes. 30 floors up, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, modern furniture that had been professionally selected, everything cold and expensive and impersonal. "Wow," Clara said, walking to the windows. "This is amazing." "But," Adrian prompted, hearing the hesitation. Clara turned to him. "It doesn't feel like you, not the you I got to know." She was right again. This condo was a statement, a symbol of success, but it wasn't a home. It was just a place he slept between work commitments. "I know," he admitted. "I barely spend time here. It's just somewhere to keep my stuff." "That's sad, Adrian." It was sad, he realized. He'd built this enormous company, made all this money, achieved everything he'd set out to achieve, and he lived in a sterile box that felt nothing like home. The cabin had felt more like home in 3 days than this place had in 5 years. That weekend, Adrian showed Clara his Chicago. Not the tourist spots or the expensive restaurants, but the places he actually cared about. The small sandwich shop near his first office where he'd eaten lunch every day for 3 years. The park where he ran when work got too stressful. The used bookstore where he browsed on the rare Sunday he took off. Clara fit seamlessly into all of it, asking questions, making observations, making him see his own city with fresh eyes. They held hands walking down Michigan Avenue, kissed on the Navy Pier, ate pizza in a tiny place in Wicker Park. It was all so normal, so simple, and so different from Adrian's usual life of business dinners and networking events. On Saturday night, over dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant, Clara asked the question he'd been dreading. "So when are you going to tell me?" "Tell you what?" Adrian asked, though he knew. "About the money. About exactly how successful your company is." "Adrian, I'm not stupid. This condo alone probably cost more than I'll make in my lifetime. Your clothes are designer, even the casual ones. You got us a table at this restaurant with one phone call, and I know it's normally booked months in advance." Adrian set down his fork. "I was going to tell you. Were you? Or were you hoping you could just keep being regular Adrian indefinitely?" "I liked being regular Adrian," he said quietly. "In the cabin, you didn't know about the money, the company. You just saw me. I haven't had that in a long time, Clara. Most people, they find out about the money and that's all they see." Clara reached across the table and took his hand. "I understand that. But you have to trust me enough to tell me the truth. All of it." So Adrian told her. About the $50 million portfolio, about being featured in Forbes, about his reputation as one of the most successful young real estate developers in the country. He waited for her expression to change, for the distance to creep in. Instead, Clara squeezed his hand. "Okay, thank you for telling me. Now, can we finish dinner? This pasta is amazing." That was it. No probing questions about his net worth. No sudden interest in expensive gifts, no change in how she looked at him. Just Clara exactly as she'd been. Adrian felt something tight in his chest loosen. "You're incredible, you know that," he said. Clara smiled. "You're not so bad yourself, millionaire." They spent Sunday at Adrian's office. Clara had wanted to see where he worked, and Adrian found himself showing her around the James Development Corporation headquarters with unexpected pride. She asked smart questions about his projects, about his vision for development, and when she pointed out that several of his properties could be better integrated into their communities, Adrian realized she was absolutely right. "You should hire a community liaison," Clara suggested. "Someone who can work with local schools, organizations. Your buildings don't have to just be businesses, Adrian. They can be part of the neighborhood." "That's a great idea," Adrian said, mentally already drafting the job description. "See, this is why I need you around." "To tell you obvious things," Clara teased, "to remind me that business isn't just about profit margins." The weekend ended too quickly. Sunday evening, driving Clara back to the airport, Adrian felt the same wrongness he'd felt leaving the cabin, like he was letting go of something essential. "I don't want you to leave," he said, sitting in the airport parking garage with the engine running. "I don't want to leave," Clara admitted, "but I have 28 third graders who need me tomorrow morning." "I know. These past few weeks meeting you, I feel like everything has changed. Like I've changed." Clara leaned over and kissed him softly. "You have changed, we both have. But Adrian, we need to be realistic. We live in different cities, we have different lives. This is going to be hard." "I know. But worth it, definitely worth it." They made it work over the next 3 months, though it wasn't easy. Adrian flew to Denver every weekend he could, which ended up being about 3 times a month. Clara came to Chicago when she had long weekends. They texted constantly, video called every night. Adrian rearranged his schedule to be more flexible, started delegating more, hired that community liaison Clara had suggested. His business partner, Marcus, asked if he was feeling okay. "Better than okay," Adrian told him. "I'm actually living my life instead of just working." In May, Clara invited Adrian to her school's end-of-year celebration. He walked into the classroom and was immediately mobbed by 28 eight-year-olds who apparently knew all about him. "Are you Miss Rodriguez's boyfriend?" One little girl asked. "Are you really a millionaire?" a boy chimed in. "You have a private jet." Another added. Clara rescued him, laughing. "Guys, give him some space. This is Adrian, and yes, he's my boyfriend, and no, we're not talking about private jets during school time." Adrian found himself enjoying the chaos, helping kids with art projects, reading stories, being subjected to a rather spirited interrogation about whether he was going to marry their teacher. By the end of the day, he was exhausted and completely charmed. "They're intense," he told Clara as they walked to her car. "I warned you. So did you pass?" "Pass what?" "The third grade approval test. Because if they don't like you, this relationship is in trouble." Adrian laughed and pulled her close. "I think I passed. Though I promised at least 4 kids they could be in the wedding." He'd meant it as a joke, but the moment the words left his mouth, they both froze. Wedding. Neither of them had said that word before, hadn't wanted to move too fast. But now it hung in the air between them, and Adrian realized he meant it. He wanted to marry Clara. He wanted to wake up next to her every morning, not just the weekends they managed to coordinate. He wanted to build a life with her. "Adrian," Clara said carefully. "Too fast?" he asked. "Maybe. But also maybe not." She looked up at him. "I love you. I have for weeks now, maybe since the cabin. I've been afraid to say it because this is all so complicated, but I do. I love you." "I love you too," Adrian said, and it was the easiest truth he'd ever spoken. "I don't have a ring, and this is terrible timing, but Clara Rodriguez, I want to marry you. Not right now, not today, but someday. I want you to be my wife. I want to figure out this whole different cities thing. I want to build a life together." Clara was crying, happy tears streaming down her face. "You're serious?" "Completely. I know it's fast. We can have a long engagement, wait until you're ready, but I'm sure about this. I'm sure about you." Clara kissed him then, right there in the school parking lot, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling. "Yes, someday, yes. But Adrian, we need to figure out the logistics. I can't leave my students mid-year, and you can't just abandon your company." "I know. We'll figure it out." And they did, slowly. Adrian opened a Denver office for his company, started spending 3 weeks a month there and 1 week in Chicago. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Clara kept teaching, and Adrian found he liked the slower pace of the Denver market, the chance to focus on quality over quantity. They moved in together into a house halfway between Denver proper and the mountains, close enough that they could escape to the cabin on weekends. Adrian proposed officially at the cabin in July, 6 months after they'd met. He'd spent weeks planning it, working with a jeweler to design a ring that was elegant but not ostentatious, meaningful but not flashy. They hiked up to the cabin on a beautiful summer morning, and Adrian got down on one knee right there on the porch where Clara had first opened the door to a freezing stranger. "You saved my life that night," Adrian said. "Not just from the storm, but from the life I was living. You made me want to be better, to live fuller. You showed me what really matters. Will you marry me, Clara?" Clara said yes through happy tears, and they spent the rest of the weekend at the cabin, just the two of them, planning their future. They got married in September, a year and a half after they met, in a ceremony at the cabin with close friends and family. Clara's father's favorite jazz played during the reception. All of Clara's students from the previous year came, along with her new class, filling the mountain air with children's laughter. Adrian's business partner served as best man, and admitted he'd never seen Adrian so happy. "I didn't think you had it in you, man," Marcus said, clapping Adrian on the shoulder, "but she's perfect for you." "I know," Adrian replied, watching Clara dance with her students. "I got incredibly lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You made good choices." "First good choices I've seen you make in years." Maybe he was right. Adrian had spent so long making choices based on profit, on growth, on success, as the world defined it. Clara had taught him to make choices based on what actually mattered, on connection and love and building a life worth living. 2 years later, they welcomed their daughter, Sophia, into the world. Adrian cut back even more on work, determined not to miss the important moments. He taught Sophia to walk in the cabin, just like Clara's father had taught her. Clara went back to teaching part-time, and Adrian started a non-profit focused on creating community spaces in underserved neighborhoods, combining his real estate expertise with Clara's passion for education and community building. On their 5th anniversary, they sat on the cabin porch watching Sophia play in the snow, wrapped in the same blankets Clara had given Adrian that first night. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed in your car that night?" Clara asked. "Sometimes," Adrian admitted. "But then I remember that I didn't. I made my way to this cabin, to you, and everything changed." "Best snowstorm ever," Clara said, snuggling closer. "Best snowstorm ever," Adrian agreed. Years later, when people asked Adrian about his success, he never talked about the $50 million portfolio or the buildings with his name on them. He talked about a snowstorm, a cabin, and a woman who taught him what it meant to really live. He talked about love found in unexpected places, about second chances and new beginnings, because the truth was, Adrian had been lost long before that night on the mountain. He'd been drowning in success, suffocating under achievement, dying slowly in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow within. The snowstorm hadn't trapped him. It had freed him. It had brought him to Clara, and Clara had brought him home. They never sold the cabin. It remained their refuge, the place where their story began, where they returned whenever life got too loud or too complicated. They taught Sophia about her grandfather through his books, through the records he'd collected, through the cabin he'd loved. And when Sophia was old enough to understand, they told her the story of how her parents met, about the snowstorm that changed everything. "So you're saying I should be grateful for bad weather?" Sophia asked, eyes twinkling with her mother's humor. "We're saying," Adrian replied, pulling his wife and daughter close, "that sometimes the best things in life happen when your plans fall apart. Sometimes getting lost is the only way to find what you're really looking for." Clara kissed his cheek. "And sometimes the storm brings you exactly where you need to be." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle this time, blanketing the mountains in white. Inside the cabin, warm and safe and surrounded by love, Adrian James smiled. He'd built an empire before he was 30, made millions, achieved everything he'd set out to do. But none of it compared to this moment, this life, this woman who'd opened her door to a stranger and given him everything that mattered. The snowstorm had brought forever, just as the universe had planned. And Adrian spent the rest of his life grateful for that decision to leave his car, to trudge through the snow, to knock on Clara Rodriguez's door, and let his carefully constructed life fall apart so something infinitely better could take its place. They grew old together in that house between Denver and the mountains, teaching Sophia and eventually her younger brother about love and kindness and community. Adrian's business thrived under his more balanced approach, and Clara's students continued to adore her year after year. They spent every Christmas at the cabin, every summer hiking the same trails, every anniversary remembering that first night when a millionaire businessman found something far more valuable than money. He found home. He found love. He found forever in a snowstorm, and that made all the difference.